Welcome to our Firefighter Support Podcast. Today we have the prime example of a firefighter couple. So obviously I've known you guys for a little bit, but why don't you start off with a little introduction to you guys. Nate, maybe you can start just a little bit about your career and a little bit of the resume, and then Kolette, you can correct him anytime he messes up on that.
Yeah, so I'm Nate Thompson. I currently work at Logan Fire Department, functioning as an assistant chief in operations. I got my start in Logan in 2003, and then before that, I got into the fire service as a volunteer in Smithfield in 1995. So 28 years in the fire service, 8 of those as a volunteer, and really the entire time also had a small business that I've ran. A lot of people like to joke about it, and we have a lot of fun with it. But it's been a good little business that I actually worked in there full-time prior to becoming a firefighter, which I think will play some relevance, I think, today, and maybe some of our discussion on the balance, right? We're going to talk about balance. So, Kolette and I, though, that's just a brief, really brief intro, professionally. But I think if we're talking about relationships today, Kolette and I met in, 88? Something like that, 1988, 1989, somewhere right around there. Yeah. We dated on and off, ended up here in Cache Valley, got married in 91, and we've been here ever since. So that's going on 32 years of bliss, we'll call that.
Oh,
every day
is
a new adventure. So, 32 years.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So, a lot of guys are already in the fire service when they meet their spouse. And so as they're dating and stuff, the spouse is already well aware of, but this happened afterwards, right?
Surprise.
So tell us a little bit about that, Kolette, and maybe just how that decision happened and kind of what your thoughts were at the very beginning when he's like, I think I want to try this.
I'm trying to even remember what you did before. He worked at Sprint Print is what it was called then, and we lived in Smithfield where there was a volunteer department just down the road, and I think he's always wanted to be a fireman, and he's like, hey, I think I might try that. I was like, go for it. I wanted him to do it, so because what's sexier than a fireman?
Oh,
Nothing.
Yeah, totally.
See, she's being super nice because at Utah State I changed my major like 8 times probably. And if I would have known there was a route to being a firefighter, at one point it was a firefighter or a pilot or whatever. You're going through all those deals. But once I graduated from school and realized the volunteer fire department was across the street, which we realized back then they used the air raid siren.
Okay.
That was my first introduction to being a volunteer fireman in Smithfield. Kolette and I thought either there was an earthquake or a raid or a war. We had no idea such a thing occurred in small towns, but back then they still used the siren to notify the volunteer firemen. So we could probably say that, coupled when I was a young boy, watching back then, the garbage men rode on the back of the truck. So when I was a little boy, it was always a garbage man or a fireman, because back then they tailboarded, right? Back when I grew up. So the dream was always there. I wasn't really sure how to get there through college. But Smithfield's air raid siren was my ticket. That was it. Yep.
That's awesome.
And that was 1994, 95 probably. Yeah.
Well, that's pretty cool. Did you guys have any other firefighter couples that were able to kind of give you some heads up on what was going to happen, or did you guys just fully jump in, had no idea what you were getting into?
We knew nothing really.
No.
No,
and volunteerism, as you know, you were a North Logan volunteer. It takes a lot of time. It'll take from you whatever you're willing to give it. Kolette and I joked when I first got on with Logan, she couldn't understand that there was actually a set schedule when I would work, because as a volunteer,
every time
I was
he'd
there
be like,
all the time.
He's like, we can't go too far for dinner because I could be paged out. So that would make me crazy. But
it was a big deal.
It
was a big deal. You don't want to miss anything. Plus, I was kitty corner from the station. I could catch most of the fires, right? Like I was always right there, first on the engine, usually at least the first 3 or 4. So, but we really didn't. I had some fun friends back then. I knew Frank Keepers in high school, so I got to reconnect with Frank. I think most people who've been in the fire service in the Valley for 20 plus knows Frank Keepers. So we had a lot of fun together. Corey Wiley, of course, Jay. Jay brought me in, and Dennis Wood, a couple of the kind of the core players back then. Zane High, those guys were all really good friends to me. They brought us into the
But didn't
the
know
group
him
and
beforehand, no.
did not know
Just
them
from
before.
the neighborhood.
Yeah. Probably the only friend that I really knew, like really close, was Mike Peterson, who was a North Park police officer and
Yep.
then went on to be a sheriff, and of course the police chief, I think, up in Preston for a little while. But I think Mike's retired now, but back then that was my connection. He was an EMT. We went to EMT school together and had a great time, because back then they trained as EMTs as well. But that was the closest I had to really, know anybody, actually.
So you guys were true pioneers, kind of figuring this out as you go along. What were some of the things that kind of maybe surprised you the most, Kolette, as the further you guys got into the firefighting, even from the volunteer? But it's just because at the beginning it's like, maybe, yeah, that sounds cool. If that's what you want to do, great. But the more you got into it, what were some of the things maybe you didn't expect to come along with the job?
At first you're thinking it's volunteer, so it's, how much time could it be? But it was a lot of time and a lot of training. But watching Nate, and I could see, like, I don't know, I was like, he was proud, he was loving it, it made him happy, so it made me happy. I don't know, probably time, because I think you think, oh, this is great, clock in, clock out, but it's not that. He was always on call, and that always wore that damn pager.
The pager.
Yes, that's the
Yeah.
coolest part. The badge, the pager.
The
No.
badge and the pager. Yep, you always had the pager back then.
When he got on Logan, I was like, oh, thank heavens we're done with that pager.
She endured that. It was 8 years, actually.
Yep.
8
It
years.
was the volunteer
Mhm.
side of things.
It's crazy.
Yeah. It was good times. A lot of good memories. A lot of lessons learned. A lot of lessons learned. I feel like, you look now, even where we're at right now with this podcast and the things we talk about, but some of the experiences back then, when you don't have any resiliency tools, or you're figuring out, it's amazing the things you remember from being a volunteer. Those are probably, I'm going to speak for myself, probably the most damage done were some of those real traumatic calls back when you have no skills really at all on how to deal with the stuff that we deal with now. And so it was a really awesome time, but in some ways, a little bit of you pay the price a little bit on what you learn from some of the trauma you endure as a volunteer. And it really gave me some good perspective in moving forward as we've moved 25 years later on where we needed to take our mental wellness, right, for our people. I think a lot of people would share that same thing, that some of their damage done was as a volunteer, no question, or early on in their careers, right?
Yeah, I think one of the things that surprised me the most, even just 3 years ago when I started with Logan full-time, the difference between being volunteer and full-time was, it was just so strange for me to go on a traumatic call, and you start at home with your kids, you go to the traumatic call, and then when you're done, you go back home around the kitchen table with your kids.
That's
and to
right.
be,
That's right.
You go on a call, like a kid call or something, that was just weird. And I didn't appreciate how hard that was until I got to Logan. And it was so nice to go on a tough call, but it all stayed at the station. We ran from the station, we came back, we processed it as a crew, kind of kept so that by the time I got home, it was like I've already had a good night's sleep, or hopefully I had a good night's sleep, but at least was able to have that initial couple hours after the call with the crew. That made a big difference for me. But as a volunteer, I agree, it was, I think, and it's harder to recognize it maybe in the moment, but definitely looking back, I think, definitely the most damage was done because you just didn't know what to do, and you get home.
And Nate was like doing his sprint print job, and so it was trying to balance that too, and then it was hard to turn it on and turn it off. I agree, but we didn't have any kids. We had our first in
96.
Thank you. 96, and then our second in 98. So it was probably more the tail end. I don't know. We'd been in it a little while before we had the kids. So
Yeah.
And speaking of sprint print, so amongst the top careers that are hardest on marriage, like in the top 5 are first responders and entrepreneurs. And you guys decided, let's take 2 of those. I'll take 2.
Yeah, let's do both of these. Yeah. Well, and early on with Sprint Print, it was a new company and it was up, we were growing quickly. It required a lot of work hours, as a lot of hours. And so to ask, Kolette to share now with the shop, and then, hey, I'm gonna be a volunteer fireman too and hang out with the boys a couple nights a week. And oh, by the way, there's gonna be 3 or 4 days of training after. It was a lot. It was big, but it was, I just, like Kolette said, she could, it was very fulfilling to me, right? It was very fulfilling and gratifying work. You felt like you were making a difference, maybe, or at least trying to make the difference, right? And growing new skills. And like, man, I might be able to, to actually do this. And then you start bumping into, some of your, like idols back then, the paramedic gods, I call them, the Edvilsons had come out into Smithfield and, and Craner would come out and, these guys would come out and you're just like, oh my gosh, these guys are amazing, and they teach your classes on how to start IVs and medications. And then, once I started meeting some of the full-timers, the guys that did it just really made a big impression on me. It was like, yeah, this is what I want to do for sure. And I'll figure out a way to make it work with running in the shop, which, was kind of a rocky transition. And, I had a business partner that had to be okay with me now sharing me with the fire station and a shop. And it was rocky road. Sometimes it was good. Sometimes he'd get tired of it, right? Which I don't blame him, because he probably, felt like, hey, I'm carrying the load here while you're out having fun being a fireman for 2 and 3 days a week. And it really wasn't an issue until I went career, right? Like he had no problem sharing me with, the volunteer world, because it didn't really, on occasion it did, but very rarely did it interfere with doing that. But, ironically enough, the shop, the nature of the work that I do, I think is truly part of, if I look back now all these years, it's probably part of the formula for my own resiliency and us having a healthy marriage and still enjoying my job at the fire department. It always gave me something completely to transition away from trauma, answering the bell, the adrenaline surges from getting up during the night, right? Like it always provided that balance for me during the day. Because, once our kids were grown, Kolette wanted her career back and, she started working again. So for me to go, continue to work my business was super, well, not easy, but it was just, hey, what else am I going to do here? So I like to be busy. So we were able to continue to do that. But it gave me something. It used an entirely different part of my brain and enabled me to shut off, kind of that primitive brain response and kind of settle into being creative and problem solving and, dealing with people at a different level. And, you don't really realize that balance, how that actually helps you deal with the trauma that we see, year in, year out. I'm thinking maybe you've experienced the same thing, Brent, I would hope. Yeah.
Well, and it's one of those things that you don't appreciate until a little bit afterwards. But it's like, and especially the aspect of, like you said, using the totally other side of your brain and just having something that's not fire, not emergent, that you're passionate about too. And regardless of whether that's a business or just a hobby, I think that's an important aspect for guys to have in their life to be healthy. The other part for me, though, is also it's just nice to be an employee. Yeah. Like to go to the fire station. This isn't my thing as far as like I don't have to make the big decisions. I just come and do my job and try to be a good employee. I don't have to deal with all the chief stuff,
Oh, dude.
And that's so nice because on your 4 off with the business, it's like that's all on my shoulders.
Dude.
And it's so nice to go to the fire station and kind of take a break from that and just come and perform,
Oh, there it goes.
Yeah, there's the bell right there.
Still has the
pager.
pager.
Still the pager, dude. We've come full circle. Clear background. No, I totally agree with that too, Brent, in terms of that ability to using the creative side of the brain is a completely different feeling, right? And so that brought such, I think, over the years, just really good balance for me in being able to kind of just decompress from a couple days of intense work, go to the shop, do my thing, and absolutely being an entrepreneur and then running a business through, I mean, good heavens, we've been in business for a lot of years, through 2 major recessions, through 9/11. I mean, 2 major recessions that we restructured our business twice. And, that doesn't come without some stress as well. So for the first 10 years, 15 years going to Logan Fire, I just got to go be one of the guys and do what I was loving, And it was great.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, it was just super, like, I mean, I was just all in. I could go there and give it my all, and I didn't have to be the boss, and, that's changed a little bit, but at least early on, that was a lot of fun.
Yeah.
When he did go to those crazy calls, knowing that when he came home that I just needed to back away and let him process however he needed to process. And that was kind of a weird learning curve for someone who's never had to deal with that before. I'd be like, what the hell, like, go get your chores done, go do your honeydews. But then I would be able to like sense it more. So I think like that whole little volunteer time was a time for me to kind of understand you're crazy when you got home. No, I'm just teasing. You're processing, I guess, is what I'm thinking.
That's fair.
Well, and I think that's a super valid point because, we've talked about how great it's been. He has both sides of his brains going, but really for the spouse, like, man, like how hard is it to, because I can just tell you some of the things that I've heard, it's just always gone, and now not only with the business where you're gone a lot for that, but the fire station, you're going to be gone holidays, birthdays, it's just part of the gig. And so how come, maybe I could phrase it this way, how come you guys didn't get into this and then a few years in be like, nah, never mind, we're not doing that, pick one or the other, do the business or do the fire, but we can't do both.
I think even with like the very full schedule that Nate had and just life being the way it was, we always made time, whether it was convenient or not. We would have a date night once a week. We would make our relationship, like that was also on the important scale. Instead of just kind of letting, I'm just too tired. Like we would for sure go do things. Always communication. I don't know. Like we just always made time for one another. Because I don't think I could have done it if I was kind of thrown to the side.
Right, because it seems like fire, business, family.
And I have to say, he's always made me feel like I am the top tier. I still better be the top tier. I don't know. Like that was most important to him was family. And then it kind of trickles down through there. But for me, just knowing that he was happy and fulfilled, that is where the support came from. Like, if I could tell, like, he didn't like it or if it was just draining, then I think I would have been like, let's be done. Yeah.
So what are do you have any specifics on how, because that's awesome despite the time commitment and all those things, but how do you make your family feel important? Because there's no doubt that if you went and asked any firefighter right now, is your family the most important thing to you?
Yeah.
Everybody would say yes.
Yeah.
Right? But there's a difference between saying that and then the family actually feeling that. Right.
No, excellent question. And at times, to be honest, like there's times you feel like you're failing, right? Like, there'd be times I tell Kolette, I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm a horrible dad. I'm never there for some of this stuff. But when I reflect back, because as you know, most of my kids are grown now. My youngest is married. We're empty nesting at this point, and I cannot believe where the time went. It to me, it just seems like it went so fast. But when I reflect, I think of like Kolette said, always time for a date or two every week. Family night, movie night, right? My kids loved that, where we hung out together as a family, even if it was just for one evening. They looked forward to it, and we made sure that happened. We had a small, we had a fun little boat. It wasn't fancy, but my kids grew up on a boat. So it was in the summertime, we'd do that weekly. We would go to Lake Powell. Like, we always planned the trips out to make sure there was always that family time. And we made sure it was quality time because the kids knew I'd be gone for, 2 and 3 days at a time. And then I'd be back, right? That's how they grew up, knowing that was the pattern. And, and try to be present because let's be honest, the day 3 after a 48, there were times of conflict, I feel like, for Kolette and I. Not from her. It was like, you know how it is, dude. You're just kind of numb. I would just be, my brain wouldn't even function, and they're trying to engage you, on after a 48, and you're just like, dude, I can't even really think right now. So we came up with some good formulas for that. So that way, I felt like Kolette kind of gave me a little buffer there, and I felt super lucky and was grateful for that, right? Because there was days I did not want to engage, right? We would talk about it. We learned to talk about, hey, what the hell's going on with you when you come home? And I'm like, well, here's the reality. Here's how I feel sometimes. And ironically, look, I mean, that was early on in our career, and now we know what's happening on day 3, right? Your brain's saturated with epinephrine and dopamine and everything else, and you just can't. You're just fried, right? Like, and it just takes time for that to wash out, and you need good rest, and so. Giving me that buffer, then I could come back and be present for those other 3 nights when I wasn't at the station, and we would try to make sure that those were meaningful times, right? Dinner together and family time, and I really think that the formula is fairly simple. It just had to be, we were consistent with time together, and if I couldn't make a birthday, we would do it on a different day, right? Like we would
figure it out.
Yeah, we'd figure it out.
I would have him call me at least once a day when he's on shift.
Yeah.
Just to even let me know kind of what he's been through, because it's almost like giving me a heads up on how to treat him when he gets home. I'd be like, how's your day? Well, actually, I did this. And then I'd be like, oh, okay. And sometimes I'd even tell my kids, okay, Dad's kind of had some really hard calls and you might just need a beat. I mean, it's harder when they're little, but at least that would give me a heads up. So we'd always, even when he was not home, we would touch base once. We still do every day. So, like, what's going on?
Yeah.
Sometimes it's not till the end of the day, but hey.
Well, I think that's huge, right? And I think and maybe it's just me, but I think it's easier said than done, because I feel like myself and at least a few other guys, that's a hard conversation to have. Like, you don't want to necessarily pass on, like, I'm struggling, or I had some stuff today that I don't think I handled very well, or whatever.
But us women, we're pretty tough. We need to know those things. So you don't have to give us like all the gory details, but even though I don't mind if Nate shares that stuff with me. So I don't know. I think it's important, because if not, then the wives don't understand, and then they'll be like, why is he being such a dink, and we won't get what has happened beforehand. So I don't know. That's how I feel. I'm pretty sure most women will feel the same.
Well, and after, and it's so true, because after the years in the fire service, right, whether it be volunteer or career, and I feel like it really started to develop later on in my career, after you're doing a job consistently, professionally, day in, day out. I feel like wives, once you're willing to kind of let them, at least give them a code, right? Like, hey, just had a shitty call. I don't want to talk about this, right? Like, but yeah, it involved a family or kids or whatever. That was enough for her to know, okay, I got it. Because at least then that gives them a reason. Why are you ignoring me, or why are you not looking at me when I'm talking to you? At least there's that knowledge of like, hey, it's going to take a minute. And I'm not saying that works perfect all the time. Like, at times it'd be like, no, I need you to freaking engage, because we've got things. You're right. We're not a perfect couple, right? Like, we go through the same struggles over the years everyone else does. But I've tried to listen to those cues of like, yeah, I need to engage, right? And sometimes it's just as simple, and I'm not perfect at it, but we talk about the listening, right? All you have to do is use our active listening skills, even a couple every once in a while, because they're hard to do, right? They're hard, they're very difficult to master, we'll call it. But man, just even paying attention, while she's telling you about her day or her frustrations at work, right? We're really good at sharing the frustrations at the firehouse and all the drama and all the calls, but they've got drama and issues too at their work, and so I'm not great at it, but I've tried over the years, and she reminds me, like, hey, I've got stuff going on too. It's like, you're right, you do. And so we've tried to do, but especially as our kids have gotten older and we have more time together. And
you said that in a way that, I don't know, I'm nervous. More time.
More time.
Even more.
There's more time to devote to you.
We had your BFF Brady on the other day, and one of the things we talked about in that, though, is that part of preparing for retirement is investing in the people that you're going to be retiring with. You spend your whole life devoted to a career, and then all of a sudden you retire and you're with each other way more than you were.
Yeah.
If you haven't invested in that relationship, that could be a pretty awkward
new relationship
to build, right?
People ask us all the time, they're like, how are you doing? And I'm like, I love it. I love it. And I know that might be sickening to some people, but we've always loved spending time together. Hence, like, we go on trips or dates, and our kids have seen us do all of these things. We like to spend time together. So as soon as we got the kids out, it was great. We're great.
Yeah, couldn't wait for the kids
Yeah.
to get out.
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought that up with what Brady said, because as you know, as you get later on in the career, your cup fills a little bit more, and you feel it, and you can sense it, that you need to take the break, right? And I feel like later on, even over the last 10 years, Kolette and I have noticed when, hey, it's time to take a break. I got to have the time out. Let's go camping. Let's go to Jackson. Let's go to Vegas. Let's go to Montana, right? It doesn't really matter where we go together. The break, to me, it is a key part of the formula for keeping the relationship saucy and spicy, right? Like, get away together, and it's,
And by the way, it is not easy with kids to do it.
No.
But you just have to do it.
Yeah.
And even though sometimes I didn't want to leave my kids with my mother-in-law or whatever, you still need to do it. And
Yeah.
I think it's important for your kids to see too. I just think it's important for your kids to know that you guys, like, I don't know, that we mean something to each other. So I don't know.
Yeah. What kind of feedback have you gotten from your kids about the career and about the life they kind of grew up, now that they've kind of all
funny.
starting to develop their own lives? But
I actually asked them, like, I said, now that you guys are grown, like, did it affect you when, like, your dad was gone for 40? And they're like, no, it's just like, that's just how it was. That's just what it was. And, like, some of their best memories are me holding them in my bedroom on Christmas Eve, like Christmas morning, waiting for Nate to get home so we can open presents. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know. I think kids are pretty resilient. Ours, like, that's just how they grew up. That's just how it was. So when they would talk to their friends, they thought it was weird that it's just how it was. I have pictures of my kids standing up against a window waiting for, dad to get home. So it's just how it was.
I think that's awesome. How did it change from younger kids to, like, teenagers? Was there a big difference there in how they kind of handled the fire life? Or was it fairly basically the same thing, just different day?
I think as they get older, they're a little more mature to handle, like, before, dad needs a little bit of rest. And now you're like, oh, you kind of went on a really terrible call, and so I think they became a little more, I don't know, sensitive to, like, your situations that you'd been in. I don't think, it would be interesting. I don't know. They've never said they've had resentment or anything like that.
Well, when they were little, I mean, like I said, I'd try to make sure that I was there and present, right? Whether it's, piggyback rides or wrestling with the boys or playing catch or going to their ball games, lacrosse, baseball, basketball, dance. Like,
So many
we all get, so many things anymore, right? We were no different. And when they were little, it was important that I try to get there, right? And if I couldn't be there on a Saturday for a ball game, Kolette would ensure she was. And they'd say, hey, bud, sorry, dad's at the station today, so he'll be here next week, right? So we just communicate with them. And I think they did okay, right? They've never come out and said, yeah, you never were there for me, which was always a fear. Like, as a parent, you're always like, oh shit, I was
Nate
this
would ask me all
terrible
the time,
parent,
like, yeah, but no. And I think also we would go to the station a lot so they could see, like, it was serious business, and they'd see him leave on, like, I don't know.
When they were little, we did that. Them coming, the station life was a big part for them. They could come and hang out, and we'd check out an engine and slide the pole, and hang out and do whatever. And then
we made them feel the boot too, like so they felt a part of the fire station as well, like the fire family.
Well, and what an interesting one that one is, right? Like, it never dawned on me what an impact that was on my young children for service. Fill the boot, the breakfast, the MDA breakfast that Mike Porter would always spearhead, and it was always the funny thing, right? Because old Mikey was so anti-union, but man, did he do an MDA breakfast, right? Like, just super passionate about it. And my kids caught that passion early on, and as they grew up as young kids, where they could help with just passing out drinks, it became hey, are we doing that breakfast when they were teenagers? Are we doing the walk? Bailey did the parade walk with me up until she was a late teen. My kids helped at the MDA breakfast every year for probably 10 or 12 years.
Wow.
So it was a huge impact. So you never know how those things like that was part of the whole big family thing, right? They felt part of what the fire culture was, the big fire family. but it was also us being together as well. So that was one that transitioned from little kids into teens. And then I would say as they transitioned into teenagers, they're like most other teens, right? Like, they would
they're like, meh.
have their not, they have their own lives. They're going to go hang out with their friends or do their thing as teenagers do. But I still think they would look forward to the trips, right? To Disney World or Lake Powell or wherever we were going. The family trip was still a big deal to them, even as teenagers.
Yeah.
So
I think that's great. And you brought it up a little bit, but I'd like to talk more about the fire family. How much did that impact, kind of, they say it takes a village, but I think it probably takes double the village as a firefighter. Like just being, and I know you guys have some great close friends in the fire service. And
Yeah.
how much did that help throughout the years, having those close friends, other fire wives, and
Helped.
trips together? And
Helped always, and I have never felt like I couldn't call any one of them for anything. Like it still happens now. I'll be like, Casey, help, I've got a sprinkler spurting out everywhere, and Nate's on a call. And
Nate's
then they would
extinguishing.
come, or I would have Chad Griffin would come and pull a stump out, or like anything that would go wrong, like when Nate, which always does, P.S. when Nate is gone, I would never hesitate or like to talk to a wife about Nate drive me crazy or the fire. Like everyone was really great. They still are great. It's a little bit different now that we're older. I don't know, but we still are like good friends with the ones we kind of grew up in the fire.
Oh, yeah. I mean, the fire family to me is huge. Like, I don't think I can overstate the significance of that I feel like for my wellness still in the fire service. We made it a point. They are family, and it's so funny. I think it's like yesterday, John Fulmer and Brian Davies, once I had all my certifications, flashing back now to, about year 2000, anytime I saw Davies or Fulmer, like, hey, when are you going to come to Logan? And at that point I was like, wow, these guys actually know who I am. And man, it kind of makes me feel neat. Well, you fast forward, what is that now? 23 years, our little gathering, we just had a little quick barbecue the other night, beer eye comes, look at all the things that have changed, has a new wife, he's happy. And to me, I can be around Brian. It's like we haven't skipped a beat, even though we may not hang out all the time. It's family for me. When Rhett comes back from Texas, he and I don't talk a ton, but when we do, it's like we're brothers that haven't just hung out for a couple years because we live in different states.
Same with like Ken Matthews and Tanya. Like I won't see him like all year round, but we'll go to the Christmas party, and it's it's like
it's incredible as I think of those friends. And everyone, as you grow, sometimes it's interesting to watch because as your families grow and you do different things, you have different likes and dislikes. Like we're not big snow skiers, so some people go do that. We don't care about that, but we like to, for years we'd go to the lake and boat, and we had friends that like to go do that. But at the end of the day, when it comes down to that circle of friends, I mean, I attribute a ton of that time spent with them, high quality time doing fun things, wherever it be, as part of that. And like Kolette said, I mean, I've still got a really strong group of friends with as couples that we have just a blast together, and it's so important.
Well, because they have your same interests. Like, well, they're going through the same thing. Like, I can talk to Heather about all the things that drive me crazy or whatever in the fire station. She understands, but she doesn't judge. And I feel like I don't know. We get it, I guess.
Yeah. I think, and I can vouch for this, but recent conversations at the kitchen table at the fire station guys are jealous of the Thompson family and the relationships that you have, right? And so, especially some of the newer guys, they look at that and it's like, man, that'd be so cool to have that, and so I guess what would be your advice to somebody that's looking to start establishing some of those relationships? Because if you wait around for them to happen, sometimes it takes way longer than it should. And so what do you do to start beginning that?
I'm gonna be spending the rest of, my old age life, not yet, but with Nate. So I'm glad that we have a relationship that we started long ago, and it's always takes work. It's not like it's all perfect all the time. He makes me mad, I'm sure I make him mad. Communication, find things to do together. It doesn't matter what. We love to travel. We like to just sit at home and watch Vikings on TV. We don't care as long as it's time spent together, I think. This is not to say when he was a shift worker, I sure did like those 2 days on. I'm like, okay, good. I can have.
Take a breath.
I can.
There it is. There's
Okay,
the
now
truth
we're
bomb
getting
of the night.
somewhere.
Now we're getting somewhere.
Every wife is probably
Yeah,
like, oh,
yeah.
it's like, oh, good, cereal nights, and that's what we're having for dinner, and I don't have to. I can do what I want. No,
You can joke about it,
it's true.
but as a new fire family, as kids are just trying to figure out this career, it's going to be hard when the hubby's not there or the wife's not there while they're on shift, right? Especially when you have little kids. But as they grow, learn to use that time as your time. And I used to I'd get all mad and I'm like, this is great. You have your time you get to do the things you enjoy, because I'm going to come home for 4 and it's going to be back to what, I need and my needs and our needs, right? For those 2 days, enjoy yourself, do your thing, hang out with the girls, go do whatever you're going to do. I don't care, but
Of course, this is after the kids are grown, because
Yeah.
during that time it's just
yeah, when they're
kids.
little, it's hard. That is
Yeah.
a very challenging time on marriages for sure.
Well, I have specific instruction for my boys when I go on shift is that there's no fun while I'm gone. Don't do anything monumental. Like, everything has to wait till I get back. And then when I get home, they love to tell me about all the movie parties they had. And we had so much fun without you, Dad.
Well, and along those lines too, Brent, like with your question about, hey, well, what is it? Well, sometimes I wonder what it is, but of what this, I don't know. I mean, we've got this pretty awesome relationship, but Kolette nailed it. We have to make the effort. You have to make the effort to do a gathering, right? They're a lot of work. I mean, you do it all the time here at the studio. That doesn't come without a lot of preparation and willingness to say, hey, we're having a barbecue, or hey, we're going to go to Vegas this weekend, or we're going to go to Window, or we're going to go to a concert in Salt Lake, and we try to always make sure people are invited and we go. But it takes effort for sure, because sometimes you're like, I'm too damn tired to do that. I don't want to do that, but we're going to do it, and it'll be super fun.
Nate
It's always super fun, huh, Kolette?
That's Nate's comment to me all the time, because I'm more like, and then Nate will push me to do things that are probably not in my comfort zone. I'd probably be just a homebody, but I'm always glad that he does.
Yeah, it seems like every friend group, somebody has to be the initiator, right? And you have people that sit around getting offended but they also never initiate anything. So it's like somebody needs to go to the concert, whatever. And I think that's perfect, because if you got to be willing to initiate stuff, and then, and then it always comes around. You develop those friendships, I think. And,
Yeah.
On that same note, like, I don't always want to do what Nate wants to do all the time. Like, sometimes I want to do what I
Yeah.
want to do.
Yeah.
So there got to be give and take a little bit.
Yeah.
Nate always wants to go to the beach. Let's go to the beach. And I love it. But I made him go to Ireland, and he wasn't so sure, but it was like his favorite thing. So I'm just saying, like, you go.
it sounds rough. Going to
Totally.
Ireland.
Well, I know, and it seems weird that I was like, yeah, but they don't have nice beaches where I can lay in the sand in October. But what an incredible, that's what that willingness, right? Like, I had to finally say, okay, let's do what you would like to do, but man, was it like, she knew, right? Like, it was probably one of the most incredible experiences we've had.
Yep.
She got to fulfill her dream of turning 30. Well, yeah.
It's fine. I'm 50.
And she got to spend it in an Irish pub, and
Sweet.
and experience all the things that an Irish pub has to offer. And on her 50th birthday, that's what she'd wanted forever. And our friend groups, her girlfriends and our friends, we made sure that happened. And I am forever grateful. Like, it was awesome.
Like, do I love Wendover?
No.
Not a whole lot.
No, it's like a 2 out of 10. for
But
her.
I'll go because it's fun to spend time with Nate. But I'll also let him do his thing, and then we'll go back to the room and just be like, okay, we're done.
Yeah. Well, if there's a concert, it makes it much, much more enjoyable.
Yes.
But, yeah, our thing, here again, emptying the cup, for me, oceans and beaches and Lake Powell water, that's just really been my formula for the healing, and of course, Brady, runs rivers up in Wyoming, and and that is just, that's amazing. That's a whole different experience in water, of course, but with its nature, it's, it's exciting, and
everyone's escapes might look very different.
yeah.
Yeah. Again, like, we like even staying home, like,
Yeah.
just doing nothing.
Yeah. And I think that'd be my advice. Find your thing. It doesn't have to be beaches. It doesn't have to be Ireland. It certainly doesn't have to be Wendover or concerts, but certainly find your thing. And I think people are working harder at trying to find what their, what their happy is.
Heck,
And,
when we had little kids, you're just in it. So we even just going out to dinner or
Yeah.
going to Sam's Club together.
I was
I
just
don't
gonna
even
say,
care.
surviving
Like,
our
Chili's.
4-month-old, sometimes it's just Walmart for us.
Yeah.
It's just you and me, Walmart, and we're gonna have a great time
Yep.
because it's just us.
but it doesn't matter because that's the point is just time.
Yeah.
Well, and you got to keep in mind too, Ryan, that time flies. My little girl was the same as your little guy. I had a 2-hour window so Kolette could go shopping, and it took 2 hours for her to figure out how that Kolette was gone, and that was it. It was screaming bloody terror for, it was probably a 6 or 8 month window. And, then that passed, and then now she's an awesome little grown lady, and I can't believe that it's gone that long, but everyone goes through that. But keep in mind, that would be my one thing to younger families. The time flies. So absolutely cherish the time because, dude, it'll be a blink in the eye. I had my 5 years at Logan so fast. I was like, what just happened? And then 10 years, and now all my kids were turning teenagers, and I was like, oh my gosh. And now I look back, 20 plus, and they're all grown adults. And we're just super lucky and grateful that we've got good, healthy kids. They're not perfect kids, but they're awesome. Just like we're not perfect, right? But we work constantly on our marriage and being couples and listening to each other and enjoying the time because, man, it's amazing how fast time goes. And I think you just got to be grateful, dude, for every day, even though some days suck,
Yeah. Well, and something I've picked up on a lot from what you guys have been saying tonight is quality over quantity.
Absolutely.
And I think sometimes we get too caught up in the quantity. Oh, I missed this or I wasn't there for that. But it seems like from what you've said is by the end or once they start growing up and getting older, it's those quality moments they had that will mean way more to them than the quantity of you being around. And so that's certainly something I'm taking away from tonight. But
no, absolutely.
Just as we wrap up here, just kind of one more thing I'd like to end on and kind of touch on it. And it's something I heard the other day is that parenting and partnering is like 99% repair work. Like how good are you at repairing? Because it's not ever going to go as you think or as you plan, or there's always things that you find yourself repairing. And so the question is kind of how did you guys learn and how do you resolve conflict or that repair work today versus back in 1991? Was it 91 or 92? I can't remember. Anyway, how has that evolved over your relationship?
I'm going to take
Whoa.
this one.
Okay. Yeah.
So Nate, I don't know if this is a fireman thing or what, but he would just like keep it all inside. Like even if we had a fight, he'd just like be silent. And I am not that person. I cannot go to bed until it's freaking talked about. Whether I don't even care. Like I'd text him, "What? Are you going to say anything? Like what the hell?" Like I just would want him to. I don't know. I would want to talk it out until it felt okay. I mean, there's a handful of times maybe that we went to bed because I just didn't want to deal with it and just roll over and leave me alone and don't want to talk to you. But for the most part, I felt like I would have to, I don't know. I felt like I was the initiator of
You mean early
the
on?
talk. No, sometimes now.
Well, since I got some more work to do, Brent.
No, I think Nate can probably like think about it longer. I cannot. Like I don't enjoy conflict. I need it to be hashed out. So I don't know.
I think right, because I think my wife would say the exact same thing. Like I am super silent, and I'll just like I don't want to say anything until I've thought about it for a long time. And sometimes that's super frustrating for her that she's ready to talk about it right now, and I'm like, yeah, just tell me whatever you want to say, but I'm not going to respond until tomorrow or wherever. But
and I would say, I mean, if we're comparing all those years, right, like the repair, the conflict, and the conflict resolution, I think early on you're super headstrong and selfish, right, when you're first married. And so obviously I'm right all the time, right, as we all think we are, And I mean, in your mind, you're like, well, I'm right, why are you arguing with me? Like, this is weird. And then you learn, right, through maturing and just the process of, I feel like you just get more wisdom as you go on. You realize, well, I think I'm right all the time, but I'm certainly not. And my spouse is super smart and super logical, Kolette can be stubborn, so can I. We both know we're stubborn, And I think early on, I would think I was right, and I would go quiet, just like she said. I'd be like, well, I'm not going to talk about this. Well, I learned to really love and appreciate her way of conflict resolution throughout our marriage, because I started to learn, like, it actually is kind of nice to just get this out on the table and then we're done with it. And that has been another thing, is I feel like we can be mad at each other, and typically if we're done with an argument, we make sure it's done. We don't carry it into the next day. There's been a couple here and there that were probably doozies, just like every other couple that we allowed, but typically it's a pretty early forgive and forget. Let's talk about it and be done with it. Let's not go to bed mad, be done with it. We haven't done, perfectly with that, but I would say as the years have gone, we've gotten better and better with it.
Faster and faster at that. Just
be like,
that's great.
What? This one's not worth it. Honey, you are right on this one, and I'm sorry. And, and we're good.
No, communication is just huge. And sometimes, like, I even just thinking, okay, I'm trying to see it from Nate's point of view. It might not make perfect sense to me, but you kind of have to respect each other's opinions too. I don't know. We are not perfect. P.S. By the way, we have disagreements too, but yeah, I just like to talk it out, whether he wants to or not.
I think it's a good thing to know that, like, look, people know me, I can be stubborn, and I tend to be super, I don't know what the right word is in terms of, I really try to be, try to convince people, I try to give them information on why I think maybe, hey, this is why I think it's the right way, or, this is maybe the right decision for us. But, Colette's, she's stubborn too, like I said, right? And so we've learned to be able to navigate that throughout the years, and knowing that about each other, and knowing when to say when, right? Like, hey, it's good, it's okay.
So that had to have changed a little bit, though, after you became chief, right? Because now you can remind her who you are. I am Chief Nate Thompson. I'm just kidding.
Yeah,
that probably works.
Let me play that card at home. That will get me really far.
That's a joke. Every time I'm like, tell him he's a bad driver. Well, do you have your...
I play the engineer card more than any card ever.
There we go.
I remind her that I do have a Class B license, commercial driver's license. So, and no tickets.
And then she has no choice but to respect, right?
None.
Yeah.
No tickets, no moving violations. So just allow me to drive. Yeah, exactly.
Perfect.
No, I think Nate and I's personalities, we kind of complement each other. I'm a little high-strung and crazy, and I don't know if he's this way at the station, but he's more calm and logical, and will get me a little, I don't know, we just kind of mesh well. We're different, but kind of the same. I don't know.
Yeah, and and you mentioned it, we joke about that transition to chief, but even as a battalion chief, you were still on shift work, and so she still had her time, right? It was still, for her, the different job I was doing, the schedule was the same. So for us, in the formula we had built in being, I feel like, successful and dealing with conflict and just getting along well and knowing when we needed to take breaks, now all of a sudden I'm back to days. So it was like going back. Now we're going back 20 plus years back when I worked at the shop all day long. So
I love it.
Yeah, and it's still a lot, because now we're back, and I'll tell you what it's done for me. The regular sleep at night, regardless, because I cover 7/7 on A shift, and so I listen to the pager with the guys, make sure I'm aware. But it's different. I'm at home, right? I can roll over. Oh, it's not a fire. It's not a big event. I'll roll over and go back to bed. And it's changed my productivity. I feel like I can engage daily with Kolette and make sure I'm present on a daily basis. Whether it's just our brief little encounters in the morning before we both leave to work, just let each other know that, hey, I see you, and we'll see you later.
Yeah, I think that's perfect, and a great way to end, because I think you pointed out that you both recognize that maybe we can both be a little stubborn, but also I think that statement you just said of just that constant I see you. Yeah. And also you guys have both complimented each other well on what you guys do well, and I think we probably don't do that often enough, but like a few days ago I just told my wife that I love watching you read to our boys, because you get so into it and they love it, and sometimes you think she has to know, right? But just vocalizing that and letting her know that I see you doing this, and I think it's great, you're a great mom, I think that can go a long way. and especially when I'm not there, right? But when I am there, to let her know these are the things I see.
And that you
it's-
appreciate.
it's
And
great.
yep.
Dude, I love it. And that is a perfect part of the formula right there. Is even it's the little things. Reading to the kids, recognizing, Kolette is an amazing, she takes such great care of me, right? She takes, cleans my clothes, and they're always nice and ready to go. And in return, I try to take care of the yard and keep the garage clean. Like, we've found these little roles, and I'm not saying, they happen for us. They happen to be
They
very
work.
traditional roles in our house, but I'm not saying that's the formula for everybody, right? You just have to find the formula, and for us, that's what works. I enjoy taking care of the yard. I enjoy doing the handyman stuff, and Colette's awesome at taking care of a house, and that's probably part of our formula, to be totally honest. We've just had our roles that we've worked out together.
Be give and take. It's got to be 50-50. It's a partnership, and like, it can't just be us pandering to all your fireman issues. We have issues too, so
yeah, we do. But, and for me too, it always helps too, because my wife's smoking hot, and I've been married to her for 30 plus years, and
Good Lord.
the romance is still alive and well, which is another huge part of the formula. You got to keep the romance rolling.
Yeah.
Got to get sexy.
Well, we don't do those kind of podcasts here, but no, I'm just kidding.
We'll do the other podcast later. Yeah.
For our separate account, we can get into.
No, that's
No,
private.
but thank you guys both so much for being here today. I know you're both super busy, and just taking the time to share this. I know it goes a long way with those listening in, and the ripple effect is huge, as we just learned from our recent Reno conference. But, these little things go a long way, and especially for people that are just starting like you guys were way back in 95
Absolutely.
with a career.
Jeez.
There's a lot to figure out, and
It's
this
a
just
lot.
goes a long way to help people get over that initial hump, I think. So thanks so much, and we'll catch you on the next one.
You betcha.
It was absolutely our pleasure.
See ya.
Thanks, Brent.